damn gun. We don't have the numbers to make an assault, and as you might have seen, it's shooting down all our support vessels.
That is why we are here. Leave the gun to us.
Come with me, then. I should warn you, my lords. We've got a slight orc problem down here.
Kill every last one of them!
I gotta tell ya, I ain't been the same since Devil's Third. I feel like Smokey after hitting PCP. I need a palate cleanser. Space Marine is one of those games in my backlog that I always planned to cover, but there never was a good time for it. But since THQ rose from its ashes like the Phoenix, it's been resurrecting other IPs in its wake. One of those is Space Marine. I guess now's a good time. Warhammer 40k Space Marine is a 2011 hack and shooter by Relic Entertainment. Relic is mostly known for RTS titles, like Dawn of War and Company of Heroes, so you'd think they'd be an odd pick for this kind of game. But they also made the outfit, which from what I've seen, looks like those parts of Brutal Legend that everyone hates. I'll give a brief summary of the game's premise. If you're not familiar with Warhammer terms, I'll post a few blurbs on screen to explain what they are. The planet Graia is under attack by orcs. Graia houses Manufactorum Ajakis, a production plant that makes war machines for the Empire of Man. Because it's too valuable of an asset to lose, the Empire avoid hitting the delete button and instead opt to send a squad of Space Marines to retake the planet. Enter Captain Titus of the Ultramarines chapter. Cool-headed, even in the thick of battle. Relic managed to bag Mark Strong to voice Captain Titus, and his performance is impressive. There's not much material to work with, but Mark Strong finds a way to make every word he says sound interesting, despite the fact that his character is just kinda there.
This is your plan.
We need to get to the surface to take out the gun battery. Or you want to go home already, Sergeant?
Not before having a word or two with the orcs.
Is that wise, Captain? The Codex Astartes does not support this action.
Try to keep up.
Backing him up is Sergeant Sidonis, a seasoned vet and old battle buddy to Titus. If Titus is cool-headed in battle, then Sidonis is a glacier. Nothing phases this dude.
Sergeant, I see you found something to keep you busy.
Worry not, Captain. I've saved some orcs for you.
Rounding out the squad is Leandros. He's fresh from training, and you can tell because he's way too uptight about following the rules.
Leandros, are you wounded?
The Codex Astartes warns against using jump packs to leap blindly into enemy fire, and for good reason.
Your days as a novice are behind you. Why do you still interpret the Codex so narrowly?
I look to its rules for guidance.
We all do. But there are also benefits to thinking for yourself, Leandros.
The game never gives him an official rank, so I looked it up, and he would probably be a battle brother, which is confusing for those not in the know, because Titus uses that term generally when referring to a squad. When these guys aren't sitting around and reviewing garbage tier movies, they're sent by the Empire to do what normal soldiers can't. Eventually, the Marines meet up with Inquisitor Drogon. He's been writing pitches for new scripts at Ajakis, but it looks like he's seen better days. Leandros has some reservations about Drogon, as the Inquisition are known to be mad sussy, but Titus doesn't let those worries affect his command. I said that X-Men Origins Wolverine had the best intro to a character, and I stand by that. But crashing an orc ship and walking into frame for the titles to appear is a close second. So how does Space Marine play? Combat comprises of melee and ranged skirmishes. You have a handful of basic combos. Press X to use your melee weapon. Press Y to stun an enemy. You can chain X inputs to create basic combos and cap them off at the end with Y. A single 1-2 results in a kick that can stun a single enemy. 2 X's and a Y results in a power strike that can also stun. 3 X's and a Y result in an area of effect attack that damages nearby enemies. Press A to dodge roll away from enemy attacks. You have a health bar and a shield that absorbs damage and recharges after a while, so long as you're not taking damage. Once your shield is down, you'll lose health. You regain that health by performing glory kills. When an enemy is stunned, you can finish them off with a glory kill by pressing B. Space Marine predates Doom 2016 and technically did glory kills first. Titus finishes off the enemy in a really brutal manner and regains some health from the act. There are two downsides to Space Marine's glory kills. First, kill animations are randomized based on your melee weapon, and their length of time varies. Second, Titus isn't invincible during those animations. It's totally possible, and highly likely in late game, that you get swarmed during a glory kill animation and die before you regain any health. The shoulder buttons, triggers, and D-pad are reserved for your firearms. Press left trigger to aim down sights, and right trigger to fire your equipped gun. You can hip fire by just pressing right trigger. Press right bumper to reload, and left bumper to lob grenades. Press any direction on the D-pad to swap out your equipped weapon. You can carry up to 4, but you're always required to have a bolt pistol with infinite ammo and a bolter. As you get kills, you'll fill up your Fury meter. When it's full, you can activate Fury by pressing in both sticks. Titus regains health at an extremely fast rate, and his hits deal more damage. Once you gain the ability, Titus can also go into bullet time during Fury by aiming down sights with left trigger. It's fitting that Space Marine takes place on a factory planet because it operates like a well-oiled machine. It's a lot like Vanquish. It's really good at the thing it aims to be, but it's missing all the fluff you expect from contemporary titles. Case in point, there are set pieces in the game where Titus has to interact with a large piece of equipment, and the game doesn't turn into a QTE mashfest. The game lets you sit back and watch Titus redirect a flat cannon onto its attached ship, or push a shell into the ammo belt of a battery gun. I'm not complaining about not having to mash buttons, by the way. It's just weird to see a game in this genre, and in this gen, avoid that trend altogether when it's clearly relying on players' familiarity with Gears of War and other cover shooters in its imagery and its structure. There's only one type of collectible in the game, and it's a servo skull. The game keeps track of how many servo skulls you've collected per chapter. You can choose to pick them up and play their audio files immediately, or play them later. These audio files add flavor text and backstory to Space Marine's campaign. You get insight into what life was like on Graia, from the lowly factory workers to the Imperial Guard, and even members of the Inquisition. This is one of those things that only I noticed, but the length of these audio files feels a lot shorter than other games. It's not something I timed, but the exchanges between characters feel like little snippets instead of full-on text walls that over-explain the setting. I said before that Space Marine relies on players' familiarity with Gears of War, and it does so in a handful of ways. Most of the campaign focuses on a 3 to 4 man squad comprising of Titus and his chapter buddies, along with Drogon. It's similar to the 4-man fire team for Delta Squad in Gears of War. Before the Marines land on Graia, Leandros is the only one wearing a helmet, which makes him a faceless grunt and distances him from the audience, unlike Titus and Sidonis. It's a lot like how Carmine isn't really considered a character like Marcus or Dom. But once Titus regroups with Leandros, he's damaged his helmet and becomes a personality with whom the rest of the cast interact. Turns out he's not as expendable as Carmine. Forgot to mention that Ultra Squad meets with the leader of the Imperial Guardsmen on Graia, Lieutenant Mira, and I can't be the only one who sees parallels with her and Anya.
Second Lieutenant Mira, 203rd Cadian Regiment.
Captain Titus of the Ultramarines.
You are in command.
I'm all that's left, my lord. Unless my commanders rise from the grave. So far they seem content to stay put.
Lieutenant, the scouts have returned to forward base.
How many?
2.
Damn. I sent out 10.
Is Sidonis being sexist, or is he impressed that a lieutenant managed to carry the entire army up until now? I don't know, but this kind of ambiguity makes the game more interesting than other Gears likes. Also, it helps that the combat is so damn good. The worst thing about Devil's Third's gameplay is that it is impossible to enjoy the hack and slashing when every enemy unit has a gun and a rocket launcher to ruin your day. That's the beauty of having orcs as a mob. There's enough variety in the units to let you engage with the melee and gunplay that Space Marine offers. You've got a shield that absorbs damage, and the ability to regain health with glory kills, so you don't have to hide behind a chest-high wall to fight. What also keeps the game fun is that you get new toys almost every time you run a corner in the early game. You swap out your combat knife with a chainsword and then get a great axe. Neither weapon replaces the other, but they're always available to you in case you want to mix up your combos. A worse game would have made the weapons loot-based, along with your armor, and string you through fights by dangling shiny new equipment over your head. It's something I'm actually afraid that Space Marine 2 will do and lose the charm of the first game's simplicity. And the jump packs. Oh, the jump packs. There are set pieces where you get to jump really high and ground pound on or near enemies. The shockwave alone stuns everything around you. And then the game gives you a thunder hammer in later sections to really feel like an act of the Emperor when you land. Kinda sucks that the hammer restricts what kind of guns you can use, but I understand it's for balance reasons. The animation team needs a pat in the back. When you move Titus around, you actually feel like a brick shit house. And the faces that orcs make when you do glory kills really sells the impact you're making on those finishing moves. This game's fun. Mostly. If you've seen my previous stuff, you know that I've played quite a number of action games with varying degrees of quality. A few of those games are gems, but the vast majority of them are middling to downright garbage. I think it's important to sample different qualities of games in the same genre. It gives you perspective on how hard it is to make a game fun, or at least entertaining, and how easy it is to fumble simple concepts like cover-based shooting, or a double trigger that doesn't suck. Sounds masochistic, I know, but it pays off when you get to games like Space Marine. If I didn't play Devil's Third, then I couldn't appreciate how Space Marine not only found a perfect balance between slashing and shooting in its control scheme, but also made the act of hacking and slashing satisfying, without holds and orc reactions during glory kills, and how the animations slow down and speed up during those segments. If I didn't play Infernal, then I couldn't appreciate how Space Marine's campaign keeps you hooked onto the early game by introducing you to new weapons and skills every 20 or so minutes. And if you're not getting a new toy, you're at least getting a new enemy unit to encounter, and they get mixed in with the common orc horde in later fights. If I didn't play Family Guy Back to the Multiverse, then I couldn't appreciate just how good each gun feels, and how the game has interesting shooting arenas that encourage running gunning with enemies that provided feedback by going into hit stun or flailing about when they die. So it breaks my heart a bit to find out that Space Marine can't carry the same energy for the entire campaign. I can pinpoint the exact moment where I realized that this game is going to be less fun. When you get deep into the Manufactorum, Drogon warns you about the sentry turrets he's left behind as a security measure.
What can we expect inside, Inquisitor?
Oh yes, just a few defenses. What comprises a few, Inquisitor? Servo turrets, mostly. Set to eliminate orcs? Set to eliminate anything with the misfortune to move within their range.
These things introduce a critical flaw in Space Marine. Enemy gunfire is hit scan and has insanely high DPS values. I can't step out into the open for more than a few seconds without losing my shield, let alone keeping all of my health. Ironically, it takes a machine built by humans to turn what was initially a fun run-and gunner into another bog-standard cover shooter. But then Drogon disables the bots and you get back to fighting orcs. So things should be good now, right? Psych. Whatever you did to help Drogon ends up creating a tear in the sus. And let's welcome Chaos. Meet Chaos Lord Nemeroth, the man behind all the schemes, and Titus is Virgil.
Sinolos!
Sort of. Turns out Drogon's been dead this whole time, and Nemeroth's been puppeting his corpse to trick Ultraforce into tearing open the sus. Now we gotta deal with the Chaos units. Here's a weird comparison I didn't expect to make with Space Marine. The Orc and Chaos rosters have counterpart units. Not surprising since Warhammer was initially a tabletop game, so each side would have similar units to each other. But it made me think of the Angels and Demons in Bayonetta 2 and how they also had analogs. It's also funny because of how the totem pole is laid out between factions. From lowest to highest, orcs have Gretchen, which are small goblins that can be pasted with the press of a B button. Then there are boys, then knobs. Chaos have evil guardsmen, who also get pasted with the B button. But then the boys' analogs are demons, and then Chaos Marines. And later on, when evil guardsmen die, they have a chance to respawn as demons. It's funny to think of the infantry as being on the same tier as the goblins, because they're much deadlier with their DPS and sheer numbers. I kinda wish there was some light squad tactics like Freedom Fighters available, because I wanted to focus fire bigger units with some guardsmen. Some orc boys have the ability to buff up their melee damage. Be careful around those units, because they can wipe out your health in a matter of seconds. Always have your fury topped up before facing them, or at least have a melt-a-gun in your arsenal. But the worst enemies by far are the Psychers. These guys fire a laser that just melts your shield. There's a set piece where you move around on top of a Titan, and you need to survive a wave of Psychers. I kept dying in this fight because I didn't have the right loadout to take him out. But then I realized I could just hug the far left side of the Titan, and let the thing walk past all of them and avoid all that damage. The boss fights are hit and miss. There was a set piece where I had to shoot down an orc ship with a mounted turret, and I kept dying because it would fly out of my range of motion. I could have ripped the turret off the mount, but then it wouldn't have infinite ammo. That fight was meh. The orc war boss is alright. I was expecting a crappy AAA boss where he does a set attack pattern that I dodge, and then return with my own combo, and then the fight gets staggered with ads swarming in. Although there were ads, the fight works because the ads serve to refill your fury, so you can pop it and swing away at the war boss until the fight ends. The final fight with Nemeroth is a real letdown.
You want to talk to your gods? I will send you to them.
He hunkers behind a shield and summons every Chaos unit to fight you. You gotta hug the cover, shoot down the Chaos Marines to provide suppressing fire, and clean up the melee units. Then you do the same thing but with Psychers this time, until Titus pushes Nemeroth off a ledge, and you finally do a QTE set piece where you alternate mashing face buttons, while avoiding the boss's attacks. Not a terrible fight, but I would have preferred it to be more like the war boss, where it's two giant slabs of meat just swinging away. The game ends with Titus killing Nemeroth and closing the sus, but no good deed goes unpunished. Leandros goes behind his back and snitches at the nearest Inquisitors, because Titus spent the whole game exposed to sus energy, which makes Leandros suspect him of being a sussy baka. Earlier in the game, Nemeroth notices resistance and taunted him over whether he'd be next to succumb to chaos. The Inquisition coerced Titus into surrendering, or else to destroy his chapter and subject Mira to their authority. Titus goes quietly, but calls Leandros a snake. He's been patient with the new guy for the whole game, but this move was too much for Titus. I'm actually excited to see them face each other in Space Marine 2, because I want Titus ready to throw down now that he's back in the Force. This game is great, but it could have been so much better. I hope that Space Marine 2 brings in new factions besides the Tyranids that appear in the trailer. I don't want the game to fall apart midway because Chaos returns again. This game is 11 years old, but it still looks good. The textures are dated, and the facial animations are a bit stiff, but it's on the upper end of stuff I usually play. The environment art does a fantastic job at evoking the sheer scale of a planet devoted entirely to manufacturing. My favorite area was the structure that led to Drogon, because it looks like a Latin cross cathedral inside, but the only thing the tech priests worship is the machine god. I'm not used to a game that has controls this good, but with areas full of debris and rusty metal. The closest any other game came to playing this good was Morphex, but that had some really bad sections in the mid-game. I don't think Relic has a license to make Warhammer games anymore, as the studio working on Space Marine 2 is Saber Interactive. Saber is no stranger to 7th gen Gears likes, as a Russian studio made Inversion. The trailers they've shown so far look like they get what Relic was doing with the first game, so I'm optimistic. However, I hope they don't succumb to chaos and introduce gross AAA trends like I mentioned earlier. No needless QTE bits, no loot-based progression, no crafting, and no workbenches. I don't mind if they offer alternate chapter skins as microtransactions, because those were also available in the first game. Play Space Marine. It's pretty cheap on Steam, especially during sales. Remember, in the cold darkness of space, you can always find warmth at the end of your melt-a-gun after purging a few Xenos.